everybody. Welcome to the Fire It Up with CJ show. I'm really excited because Paul Selig is coming to Seattle and I'm going to be able to see him. Yay! And today we're going to be talking about the Book of Mastery and also what happens when you get together and have a channeling session with Paul Selig. So welcome, Paul. I'm really thrilled to have you.
I'm glad to be back. Thanks, CJ.
And I'm excited to come to your Seattle workshop. So I wanted to, and for folks who are not familiar with Paul Selig, this is maybe I think my third or fourth interview with him. But he's a channeler. Is that how I describe yourself? Yeah.
I say yeah.
Channeler. So he was a college teacher for 26 years, and I know the last time I spoke to you, you'd actually retired from those jobs. And he has written, this is one of 3 books?
This is the 4th book now.
This is the actual 4th book. And I know that, and I'm not sure if are you getting more stuff coming through now?
There's another book that's already done. It'll be out in June. Yeah, the book.
Wow. And you mean this coming June it will be coming
this
out?
Coming June, yeah, June 2017.
Okay, what's that book?
That's called The Book of Truth, and it's the second book in the second trilogy that my guides have dictated through me. So the Book of Mastery was the first of the trilogy.
Right.
And Book of Truth is coming out, and the third book, I don't even know what it is. I just know that they're going to deliver it sometime within the next year.
Wow.
But all I do is just wait until it's time, and then they say, this is the title of the book, and this is what we're doing. And then they dictate it.
And how long does it take to actually dictate a book?
About 30 days of sessions. So, and sessions can be between half an hour and 15 minutes a day, depending on how many days.
And you do 30 days continuously, or do you have to have breaks? Because there's a lot of energy, I assume.
I used to do them continuously. The first 2 books were done with maybe a day break now and then.
Right.
And usually, so I could go off and teach at NYU, and I would just take the morning off or the afternoon off. Now they'll often work 4 days a week.
Wow.
There was a period where they were working every day. They channeled about 100 pages.
Right. I love how you describe them as them working versus both of you working, because I assume that takes a lot out of you physically to actually channel a book.
It's a trip. I mean, it's a lot of energy that's coming through at once, and it's concerted mental focus for me. But really, my job is to take dictation.
Right.
So I'm sitting there in the chair. Literally, it's as if they're reading the book aloud through me, and I'm just saying the words as they come. And then there's this lovely person who's now been transcribing. I used to have to do that myself. She just gets the recording, and then I get to see what actually was said after the fact. I mean, I'm somewhat aware, but not fully. But I'm sort of the verbal stenographer. That's my job.
Right, and it's and what I find incredible, because I was listening to one of our interviews in the past, you said it's unedited. So you literally just in your book. When I read the Book of Mastery, it's unedited. The gal who's transcribing literally just takes what you're saying and types it out. Which, how many authors have the joy of doing that?
Yeah, it's quick. I mean, occasionally the transcriptionist will say, I don't understand this word, and it's usually because I garbled the word because I was speaking so fast, but the meaning is usually pretty clear. Yeah. I think there were maybe 2 words that were changed in the entire manuscript, which is a lot. I mean, the biggest challenge with this stuff is punctuation, because it's really punctuating a verbal transcript,
right,
which has dashes and clauses and all this stuff. I mean,
right,
it's complicated.
Right.
Yeah, there's no changes.
And you're kind of making it seem so simple, like I'm just taking dictation, like you're just like a stenographer, which I think there's probably a lot more than that, right? I mean, you have to be able to vibrate at a certain level, right, in order to okay, even if you are a radio and you're picking up a frequency, don't you have to do things physiologically? Like you were saying, your eyes change color. So what is happening physiologically for you to have that happen?
I think somebody needs to wire me up someday and find out. I mean, nobody's done those tests. When I'm channeling, there's an energy that comes through. I hear one phrase again and again and again, and when I give it voice, I just keep going. And they keep talking through me till it's done. But when it's done, I'm vibrating like crazy, and I'm completely stoned from it.
Wow.
And when I do groups, it's the same thing. I mean, during breaks in groups, I'm just like a rag doll in a chair.
Right.
I'm cooked.
Wow.
And it's fine because when I'm channeling, I'm animated and I'm sort of there's a merging that happens energetically with the guides, and there's this other accent and these other expressions that can come through. But what actually is happening to me physiologically, I don't know. Something is, you
Right.
know, that's apparent, and you can feel the energy. I mean,
Right.
it's in the room, when it comes, and when I'm doing workshops, everybody gets it. So, I don't know. I'm a collaborator. I will say that. I feel like I'm a collaborator. I don't think these books could exist in the form that they're in without me. But
Hmm.
I think they were channeled through you. They'd come through with a color that was you. I mean, the guides are referencing my vocabulary, at times my history, and they're having to attend to all of my questions.
Hmm.
Um, and they're often there because if I'm taking the dictation and there's something that really bugs me, I have to say, hey, wait a minute. And then they'll say, Paul is interrupting. And then
Right.
they'll take up the question and they'll unpack it. In the newest book, the Book of Truth, they did something completely new because it's really the cleanest transcription. I mean, it
Mm.
really is such a carefully
Mm.
executed spoken text.
Hmm.
So careful, careful, careful.
Hmm.
And I didn't get to interrupt in the same way because what they started to do for the first time was they would say, Paul has a question. And I almost had a question. I just hadn't articulated it yet. And they preempted my question. And then they would say things like, Paul is asking, if me and my fellows are out for a stroll on the boulevard. And I'm thinking, I would never say that. So they're speaking as me to keep me out of the way. But the funny thing
Wow.
is, question I would have asked, just in slightly different language.
Right. You don't talk about the
So
boulevard anymore.
I've never said my fellows in my life, but that's very much their language. And
Wow.
I think it was actually a smart move
Hmm.
because it stops the interruptions
Right.
and the potential teaching to be somewhat derailed in
Right.
another direction, which has actually happened in some of the books.
Yeah.
They've had to
Interesting.
take it in a direction to support me and my worry about the information that was coming through.
Yeah. And so, when you actually have a work group session, of which I'm going to attend, when you're here in Seattle on September 10th and 11th. And so it's a 2-day event. And I thought, wow, that's a lot. Like, that's a lot to actually put your body, for you to put your body through. And so, what
Mm.
happens during those events,
It
right?
is.
Yeah, I know that you do an attunement and then you channel messages, but what's actually happening? How would you describe what happens for you when you're sitting through one of those events?
I show up, sit in a chair,
Hmm.
I turn the tape recorder on, I close my eyes, I start to hear, and then boom, it comes out, and then it doesn't stop. So they'll usually lecture at the beginning on create a context for whatever the weekend's going to be, because I never know quite what it'll be. It really depends on who's there,
Oh,
because
wow.
they've been delivering a lot of new stuff and new teachings, and that you can get a workshop where everything is brand new. The attunements are specific, and they'll usually do those early in the workshop. And there's a couple of them that are really there to sort of get your whole system at a level of resonance with the work that they're doing. And they're physically palpable. So they use language as a way to encode the field so that you can feel the frequency in the broadcast. And they'll get everybody working with it so that they can have that experience. And once that's done, once the context is set, and everybody's been attuned, I have no clue what's going to happen. I mean, I know what normally happens. There's a number of attunements that they bring through, and some of them are very new.
Hmm.
And they're always building on prior teaching.
Hmm.
So once sort of there's been a critical mass met, with a certain subject or a certain level of vibration, they usually don't spend a lot of time there. I mean, they used to do entire weekends on fear, and now they'll speak about fear, but they'll move us past it because they've developed ways to sort of shift the field so that we
Interesting.
don't have all that time unpacking it. It's just sort of, okay, here you are, here are these belief systems, and the truth of who you really are. The truth of who you really are doesn't correlate with any of that crap because it's never been real. It's never been
Mm.
who you are. It's what you've
Mm.
invested in. It
Mm.
seems that what they're getting us to that level of resonance where that other stuff doesn't exist in the same way.
Mm.
Interesting process and sort of alchemical as far as I understand it. They'll also, over the course of the weekend, they always take a lot of questions on the
Right.
teaching itself,
Mm-hmm.
but they also take questions about people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got a 14-year-old. She doesn't speak to me anymore. She's running around with some other kid I don't like. I tune into the mother. I tune into the 14-year-old. I turn into the one she doesn't like. And I can sort of move the energy and the dynamic. I do a lot of that kind of work that's really very personal and very, very effective. It's very quick stuff that happens fast, but people tend to get that. But it's a real immersive experience. It's not like you're just talked at. You're really working with the energy and the guides directly.
So when you've actually had people who've attended the workshop, is it a sense that the attunements, the attunements are specific to that group that's there, and the messages are for that, or is it like, here's what we would like to talk about, so whoever shows up, fine, or is it some combination of the two?
I think it's a combination of the both. I was just at Esalen where I channeled a 5-day workshop, and
Wow.
that's 5 hours a day, 5 days in a row. And they brought through a new attunement there at the end of the week. But they really brought everybody to a place of being able, I think, to work with the frequency. And my experience is once they do that a few times, it becomes part of the way that they work. They'll bring it through regardless of who's there. But, I did a workshop not too long ago where 80% of the people there were brand new to my work.
Wow.
It was a more it was not a beginner's workshop, but they really spent the time in creating a context for everybody
Right.
to get everybody working. And then I went to Madison, Wisconsin, where 80% had either done a workshop before or read the books, and it was a completely different experience.
Interesting.
So they went through a different level of instruction.
Wow.
So it's you can be ready for a level of instruction and not have had anything to do with me or the books prior. It's just what you can hold.
Right.
If there's somebody there in the workshop or a bunch of people there going, what the hell is this? This looks just nuts. And there's resistance in the room. It'll change the dynamic of the workshop because it's obstructive energy.
Right.
But you don't get a lot of that anymore. Most people are coming really ready for this.
Right. Interesting. So, all right. So the book, I'm going to talk a little bit about the book that we were talking about, the workshop. And so the workshop, when you're talking about attunement, and I'm going to go back to the workshop again. When you talk about an attunement, so in Reiki, they have attunement, and there are lots of other people that have attunements, and sometimes it's just listening to the word spoken can be an attunement, but you're actually getting your energy so that you're vibrating at the same level as whatever is coming through. So in the case of your attunements, is it just listening that gets you attuned, or are there actual like rituals and processes that you use to get people attuned, or both?
I think they're both. The first several that they've done have all been done through language. And the language itself seems to be encoded. It's almost, if you can imagine, it's like an incantation, An incantation sounds magical and scary to some people, but really it's just loaded language. Any prayer or hymn, you can say, can be thought of that way. But it seems that when you work with a language out loud, you shift your field. And it's pretty immediate. People can feel the shifts, and then you can send the energy to somebody else. I just did something in a bookstore in California last weekend, and there were like 70 people, and they all got it. They could all feel it. They were all sending the energy. And these may have been people who just sort of wandered into a book signing, So you don't have to be that primed. It seems to work if the intention is there. And there is intention here. Some of the attunements they're doing now are really about just co-resonance that seem to operate without language in the same way. And one of the things the guides sometimes do is they stand before people individually and they look at them. And that's the one where my eyes seem to change color. People often say my eyes are on a bright blue. But and then they speak to them individually, and they'll just say something like, it's usually, you are here, you are here, you are here, or you are free, you are free, you are free. And what they're really doing, as far as I understand it, is sort of witnessing at the level of truth and not in agreement with the trauma, the pain, the fear, the ego, all the stuff that we think we are.
Mm-hmm.
And those are very, very large shifts for people.
Mm-hmm. And are they permanent shifts, or are they a
Yeah.
felt sense where people know, like, now I know what it feels like when I'm there, or is it some combination?
Both. I hear both. It's a permanent shift and that the level of activation is there. But you can
Mm-hmm.
have you can wire your house for electricity, but
Mm-hmm.
if you don't plug anything in, so what?
Right.
You know, you have access, but you've got to work with it. So I assume the same thing is true with Reiki, which is if your hands are attuned, you can run the energy, but if you're not working with the energy consciously, you're not going to have the same experience as one who is actively working with
Right.
this.
So if I'm given an incantation of I am here, and I say that in the workshop, and then I
Mhm.
don't say that ever, I may say that again. When I say that again, though, I'll probably trigger that kind of
It's as far
resonance.
as I understand, it's in the field. And the other thing to understand
Mm.
is it's not, the small self. It's not Paul saying, I am here, I am here, I am here. It's what the guides call the divine self or the true self.
Mm-hmm.
So the claim, I am here, is always true at that level. Do you
Mm.
understand? They've
Mm-hmm.
done others of these. The ones that they've worked with the most are I know who I am, I know what I am, I know how I serve.
Mm-hmm.
Personality level, I don't know who I am. I don't really know what I am. I know
Mm-hmm.
who I think I am.
Mm-hmm.
But the guides have said that the true self always knows. So when you're claiming at this level, you're going into that level of agreement. And at that level of agreement, it's always true. And that's when the field begins to
Okay,
shift.
so when you're saying that the field is always around you, so there is a place in which all those things are true and they're happening to me right at this moment. And so when I tune into the vibration of that truth, I can actually feel. Is that what's happening? Is it
Yeah, people feel it. I mean, there are shifts around the body. There are shifts in the body. I don't think the field's not just there. It's
right?
it's encompassing us.
Right.
But it's about another level of identification, I think, that goes beyond what the guides call the small self.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Its experience here. So the attunements seem, if I understand this, to operate as sort of a recoding or a rewiring of the radios that we are in
Mm-hmm.
order to play the broadcast that they say is always available.
Mm-hmm.
And they say often, we don't make you what you're not. We show you who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so essentially, this isn't something that's not who we are. It's just what we haven't accessed.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
essentially, that's the opening.
Okay, so I want to break down that statement. I know who I am. So when I
Hmm.
tune into that, what in your book you talk about, like, what is it that I am ultimately, a divine expression or divine, and what does that mean to be divine?
Well, they're saying the true self, it's the incarnated self who knows who much she is, and they're saying who knows who and what she is beyond the expression. Beyond the expression, she's taken in form. She's taken in form, the eternal self. They're saying the eternal self who is always true, who is always true. That is who you are. That is who you are. Everything else, not even who you are. Everything else is an idea of who you are. They're saying that you've either appropriated or agreed to, depending on your birth, depending on your birth, your family, the culture you're born into, the culture you were born into, and the time you took a body, and the time you took a body. You believe yourself a certain way. You believe yourself to be a certain way in agreement to what you were taught. This is an aspect of you. Yes. This is an aspect of you, yes, but it's not the truth of who you are when you claim who you are. They're saying when you claim the truth of who you are, you self-identify as the divine self. You self-identify as the divine self, eternal self, manifest truth, the one who can be known, the one who can be known at this level, And then they say, and then it becomes your expression, which is how you serve, the expression of your true self. The expression of your true self in manifestation is how you serve, period. And they're saying, period.
Hmm. So,
From them.
so,
Yeah.
uh, so, what does that mean? So you said I'm trying to break that down. So you said there's this kind of eternal self that is there, this divine self, and they talk about it in a lot of different books. But when you are actually resonating with that version of yourself, as far as you know, what is it? How do you know that you're even there? Like, what does it feel like when you're the eternal Paul, or is Paul even in the equation when you are your eternal self? Since I'm sure you've played with
I,
this.
Yeah, I have, and I can't say that I've realized it, but I know what it's like to be there because when I'm channeling, I'm there. You know,
Mm,
operating at that level, I'm not operating in fear, and I'm
mm-hmm,
not operating in judgment, and I'm not worried about the fact that I need to lose 30 pounds or any of the things that I would normally, as a small self, be focused on.
mm,
It's just not present anymore.
mm-hmm,
And what is present is an awareness of who everybody else is at that level.
mm,
People, people look remarkably beautiful at that level, and
mm-hmm,
there is only deep compassion and
mm,
love. There
mm-hmm,
is no fear. I mean, that's
mm-hmm,
the whole thing. When you're operating at this level, you're not agreeing to fear in the way that we've been taught to.
mm-hmm,
And forge entire identities in fear. If
mm-hmm,
I'm this, who am I? I have to be that or I'm nothing. I
mm-hmm,
mean, it's a whole bunch of crap. So if
mm-hmm,
you can imagine sort of having an experience of being that's not informed by that, it's a radically different way of knowing. The other thing is you begin to move to your knowing, and your knowing isn't your thinking. The trying to
mm-hmm,
figure out self. You know, the guides say the small self thinks, the true self knows. So
mm-hmm,
you to align, you can call it on an intuitive level or a knowing level, but the guides also say that knowing and realization are the same things.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Means the same thing. To know is to realize.
mm-hmm,
Shift to this level of consciousness, suddenly there's a whole lot more that's accessible.
mm-hmm,
Now, the challenge for me, and I know other people, seems to be how do I maintain this? I have these experiences of it, but it seems to be that a bunch of the work that's happening is about re identification
mm-hmm,
and no longer identifying with the stuff or the narrative or the history that we've been taught to buy into. And
mm-hmm,
that's a big challenge because
mm-hmm,
we're reminded every day.
mm-hmm,
You know, the guides say if you look around the room you're in right now, everything in that room has been given a name by somebody who came before you.
right,
This is a desk, this is a shirt, that's a wall.
mm-hmm,
And we know everything based in the history that we've been given. And I don't think we really understand the extent to which we've assumed all of these things to be sort of real and permanent structures, when in
mm-hmm,
fact, there were things that were made. And the guides say anything that's been made can be remade in a new way. I mean, that's how things change. That's how
mm-hmm,
manifest. So they're working with us at the same level. We've identified with
mm-hmm,
the human personality in
mm-hmm,
ways which they're seemingly moving us beyond. But the
mm-hmm.
experience in and of itself can be pretty remarkable.
It's funny because when I do coaching, when I coach with clients, I get in that zone. I don't even know how to describe what that zone is, but there's a sense of seeing things that I don't like. I'll say things to people when I'm actually working with a client that I actually won't even remember saying to them unless I write it down. And they're writing it down and they'll repeat it back to me months later and I don't even remember saying it. Like, do you remember when I said this? And I was like, well, what were the circumstances and why did I say that? They was like, well, I was saying this and then you said this. I'm like, oh yeah, that was good. Like I can't
Yeah,
believe that. That's good. But it's not. What's interesting is I really don't even know half the time if it's really coming from me.
yeah,
And when I'm working with clients, I do like I can see their beauty and sometimes like, oh I can see your beauty. It's almost frustrating me that you can't see your beauty because it's so clearly obvious when I'm working with you. And so I actually I'm glad that you mentioned what it feels like because I've had those little moments and it's when I'm coaching other
yeah.
clients that I kind of get into that zone. And what a wonderful thing. I mean, it's now thinking for me like a personal challenge. How could I get in that zone? In more, how can I colonize more parts of my life so that I'm in that zone? And what's even allowing me to get in that zone in the first place? I don't know if you've asked yourself the same questions.
Yes and no. I mean, I ask it more for other people than it
Mm-hmm.
occurs to me to ask it for myself. But so much of my work is sort of being on call as the one who hears.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, some of it I believe is choice. Some of it I hear is allowance and agreement. So they're saying to be at this level. So if you agree to be at this level, you call to yourself the circumstance that will allow you to know it, have experience of it, and have the experience of it. They're saying you're in charge here very much. So they just said, I mean, again, they're showing me the radio metaphor. And really, you're choosing what channel you play. You want to hear the hard rock, you go over here. You want the easy listening, you turn the dial.
Right.
And this is somewhat about turning the dial. And allowing, well, let me get it. I was going to say something you're wrong. And they're saying already that I'm wrong.
Okay.
Some of this is about not being sort of subjugated by your emotional self to dictate who you are and how you have all your experiences. So if I'm always in reaction or in defensiveness or in protection, I'm not going to have my awareness of who and what I am, because guides would say, those are ways of knowing yourself. It's just not the truth of who you are. I taught college for a long, long time. And in a lot of ways, college teaching was my spiritual practice. And for the exact reasons that you described when you were working with clients. Any real teaching I've always felt as an act of love. And when you're judging someone, you're not loving them. And when you're seeing them in their potential and knowing that they can be realized, you're giving them an enormous amount of permission. And it's a great gift. And I think it's a great privilege. And, when the guides work for me and they're working at that level, I have the experience at an even higher level of witnessing really God, having this experience in a body. I mean, it's a trip, I'm receded when it's happening, but when they step in and they sort of walk around the room and look at people, I'm there.
Yeah.
And, I'm not a touchy-feely kind of guy. I'm a little shy and a little, reserved. And they're not, clearly. And it's a very different way of being. But where they're going with this is that how you perceive your world from this level of consciousness actually transforms the world that you see. Just like how you witness your clients is supporting them in your realization. And my hunch is you don't remember what you said because I'm not going to call it channeling, but you're inspired in that moment.
Right. No, I channel too, so it could be that I'm channeling too. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny because when you're saying this, there's a part of me that's emotionally reacting, and I don't even know what it is, but it's kind of like a poignancy. Like there's something really important about that when we do actually release into that who we really are. There is some, I don't know why, but what you just said really had some meaning to me. So thank you. Yeah, it's just kind of hitting me at an emotional level. I don't even know why, but it's huge. So thank you. Okay, I've now lost all of my interview. All right. I want to talk to you about last time I talked to you. You'd had a lot of transition in your life. Because it was in February, and you had switched departments. Your dog had passed. You dropped 2 jobs. You had some health issues, which was affecting your weight. There's a lot of changes that were happening. And in that time, you said, they're life lessons. They're life lessons, because it's hard. I opened myself. I had a huge opening energetically, I think around, I don't even remember, February, March. Or no, actually, it was after I talked to you. It was like February. You were the precursor, like the kind of warm up, the hot tub before the big kind of happened, and it literally was like that kind of like explosive, energetic opening that happened. And in that opening, all this kind of confusing, life orientating changes kind of happened, similar to what it sounds like happened to you. I'm still in process. That was a while back for you. But now when you look back at those changes that you went through personally, do you put a different frame on it? Does it feel like a lesson? I know you knew intellectually it was a lesson, but can you look back and say, yeah, that was the lesson?
Yeah, I can. I don't know if it's done. I don't know if it's ever done.
Yeah.
But I look at that chunk of time, which I really feel just really recently ended.
Yeah.
As I don't even know how to describe it. At the time that you spoke about last February was really challenging, and I remember it vividly. And I literally felt like every part of my life that I had counted on suddenly couldn't be counted on anymore.
Mm.
My emotional support, which was my dog, my mobility, my body, my health, my reputation, everything sort of at once.
Mm.
I was like, and then I sat down to channel the Book of Mastery in the midst of with ice packs down my back.
Mm.
And the guides spoke to it. And one of the lessons that they gave, and the teachings that they gave was, they said, the divine self is never persecuted. The true self cannot be persecuted.
But
It's
what does
just not.
that mean? Because listened to what you said before. I'm like, I still don't get what that means.
I get it, unfortunately, or fortunately I do, is that there's an aspect of us that is never in fear. There's an aspect of us that is never ashamed. There's an aspect of us that cannot be assailed by anything. And that's the truth of who and what we are. That's the master self. And the
Mm.
self-identification with the small self, whose sense of well-being is dependent upon what other people do and what the landlord says, or whether the dog lives or the husband or the wife stays or leaves. If everything is so dependent, and my sense of truth and well-being and safety is so dependent on the externals, I'm never going to get past my attachments to what these things are.
Mm.
And for me, I wish the dog were alive. I really liked my old apartment. I've moved twice since then,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm happier. I'm much happier than I was
Hmm.
this time last year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also, I have to say, in many ways, much less afraid than I used to be.
Well, I just got
Because,
chills. Oh my God, I just got a huge reaction all over. Wow.
yeah,
Wow. Wow.
and
So that actually was a huge accessing that aspect of yourself that isn't
uh,
afraid. Did that kind of come more into your forefront?
yeah, I mean, I was at NYU for 25, 26 years.
Yeah.
And I was running a graduate program at another school for close to 20.
Mm.
And I believed I would be on the street if I didn't have these jobs and my benefits and this sort of sense of identity in the world that gave me a sense of value. I mean, I remember, being on the phone. I was actually in Portland with a friend on the couch who I was holding on to for dear life when I resigned from this job I'd had for
Oh
26 years.
yeah.
I was thinking, I'm going to go be a channel. I'm going to leave my retirement. I'm going to leave my health insurance, and I'm going to go be a channel. I'm somebody that didn't even believe in channeling 25 years ago. I thought it
Right.
was funky and nutty.
Right.
So, and here I am still. I'm not saying that it's perfect and that I've become some sort of courageous warrior, but I'm operating in a world that's a little less threatening than it used to be.
Hmm.
And my sense of who I am, honestly, I'll say this, every time I take a step forward in becoming visible with this work, I always think the ceiling's going to fall down on my head,
Mm-hmm.
like something that's the end of the world. Um, and I was on ABC Nightline 2 nights ago,
I know. I saw that. That's
I know,
incredible.
crazy. But the funny thing was, I watched it. I know at a certain level that that's just a way that people can see me. They called me the love psychic. I mean, I've never been called that before. I can't even I'm the love psychic, but I thought it was a nice piece about the
Yeah.
psychic work that I do. But the level of investment in what you think of me is not there anymore. I would normally hide under the bed or be listening for the buzz. I don't
Right.
care.
Right.
I don't care in the same way. I don't have to because it doesn't change much. It might change somebody else's idea of my credibility. That's about it, for better or for worse, depending on where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
But all of that stuff that I thought was so important doesn't feel so important anymore. I'm not saying that's the fruits of that time. I think it's what I'm emerging to
Mm-hmm.
through doing this work. I mean, I can't keep hearing these teachings day after day after day and then decide that I'm only as worthy as what somebody else thinks of me, because
Mm,
that's the antithesis of the teaching.
mm. Wow,
You know,
that's huge. That's a
yeah,
huge lesson to go through and know, you know what, I'm safe. I quit these jobs, which were all where I was identified, my ego, my self-worth, everything, and to quit and say, yeah, like it may not be perfect, but you're safe. Like all, you're not homeless. All these kinds of things that were running through the stories that were built up in your head, not true, right? It's so
no,
fascinating. Mm. Okay, so I recognize that I actually have my own set of crazy stories, and there are crazy stories that a lot of people on the spiritual path have, and I wanted to run them by you to see maybe what you would say based on your own experience in working with people or the guides or whatever. But I didn't even realize that it was a story until I ran into someone, a yoga teacher. I had a coffee with her, and she said, "You know what? And I don't even remember what she said. Here's what I took away is that I say to myself, you know, I'm working with clients so they can find, and here's the narrative. Every single one of you has a set of divine gifts, and you're given these gifts and attributes and characteristics, you know, your spiritual DNA, in a way to give back to other people. And when you do that, that's when you fulfill your highest path and highest good. A lot of spiritual people walk around talking about their highest path, highest good. And it's about fulfilling their potential, using
yeah,
all their gifts, constantly striving to be better, more spiritual. And I realized and it was from talking to this gal, that also is a story.
yeah,
It's a different kind of story, right? Just like I'm a NYU professor, I'm a high tech person. It's just a different kind of story with a different narrative, but it's still a story. And I wanted
yeah.
to get your thoughts on that because a lot of spiritual people run around saying the same things, myself included, and I caught myself.
I think it's a paradigm based on achievement still.
Yeah,
You know, if you figure it out and you do what you're really here to do, you're going to get the life that you want.
right.
And somebody who is dealing with, say, a real illness
Mm-hmm.
that means that they have to be cared for 24/7 may be giving other people an enormous opportunity to serve and
Mm,
in a very different way.
right.
It's not about I have to go off and be this thing. I mean, I don't get that so much. I don't get it. I think I did when I was younger.
Meaning, like
And
you don't personally experience it, or you don't even understand the mentality.
I a little bit of both. I understand the mentality, but so much of the mentality is about feeling wrong and
Mm,
feeling unarrived, and I'm not there, and it's not going to happen. The people come to me all the time in my practice, and they say, "I don't know how I serve." And the guides have said how you serve is how you're most fully realized as your true self. But that's actually happening at a level of consciousness. And
mm,
they also say that the true self is the one who calls the service into manifestation, not the small self who thinks it's supposed to look a certain way.
mm,
And it's in the Book of Mastery, and it's a story that I like. It was we used a couple of the live streams that I do
mm-hmm,
because the guy said this is in the book, and then they'd give a lecture in front of a bunch of people.
mm-hmm.
And there was a few Q&As that we included from those, and there was a woman who said something like, I drive a school bus for a living. I want to know how I serve. I
Mm-hmm.
drive a school bus for a living. Every day I see the divine in every kid that gets on my school bus,
Oh.
and I claim the word through them. But what am I really here for?
Mm-hmm.
It's my real work. And the guides were like, you're doing it. This is, and I knew she was doing it too. If I had had a school bus driver like that, I might have made it through junior high school a little bit better than I did.
Right,
You know,
right.
but I don't have anybody seeing my beauty and realizing me and
Yeah.
knowing that it's a part of God. I mean, who's to say? We live in a culture where we think if it's not being lauded by somebody else and it's not being seen as important, it doesn't have value.
Mm,
And it's so nuts. And it's a form of spiritual materialism too. We can
right.
bring the whole thing to that. I mean, people say, I want to be enlightened and I want to be enlightened by next year. And I run into this
Right.
sometimes as if that's something that you buy or
Right.
you choose or you order from the catalog or you can rush. The process, maybe you can, and maybe I don't know, because I don't feel terribly enlightened. But the guides have said that even our idea of enlightenment is the small self's idea of what that means.
Mm-hmm.
That you can't know it. It's a state of being, and
Mm.
you know what it is until you're there. It's just not possible.
And I bet even if you are there, you may not even know that you're there. Even if you're
I,
getting close, who knows? I mean, I'm
I,
not even close.
I agree with you. I'm a little wary sometimes when people announce themselves as being enlightened. I don't know what that means,
Right.
but maybe I'm just feeling less than. I'm not there yet, but I don't know that that's the point. If
Mm-hmm.
the point is being and knowing and loving and being expressed at that level, maybe the point is just learning. Somebody at this book signing the other day said something like, well, I just want to feel good all the time. That's what I really think I'm supposed to feel if I'm really doing this work. And, there is that teaching, and maybe it's not wrong. But what the guides said was, who says that that's the way you're supposed to be all the time? And
Mm.
every time you grow, you may smack the ceiling with your head. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not always that comfortable to grow. And then they talked about labor and giving birth as not being the most pleasant sensation for the body. It's
Mm-hmm.
pain,
Mm-hmm.
but there's still growth attached to it. So the idea, I think, that we should all be, I don't know, beautiful, wealthy, manifesting from our vision boards everything that we want every day. I don't know that that's the case. It may well be. I may not be getting it. I'm going to go to them because I can feel myself going up against this door. And they're saying, yes, you are. So I have to record, let's say this. They're saying we would like to say this, the idea of suffering as having value. The idea of suffering as having value must be released, must be released. There is no value to suffering. There is really no value to suffering. Things may be learned in different ways when you encounter growth. When you encounter growth, you may choose how you encounter it. You may choose how you encounter it when you realize yourself. And when you realize yourself as not needing what you thought you did, as not needing what you thought you did, most of you will find the release of pain. The release of pain is immediate. It is immediate. But the question is, can you name yourself? Can you name yourself? Name yourself as the one who is happy, as the one who is happy or is in joy or is in joy. Can you know yourself? Can you know yourself as that, as what you are, as that, as what you are? You can. The moment you can, it can be claimed. It can be claimed, aspiring to it in some ways discounts the experience you're now, discounts the experience you're in now. And by doing that, you remove yourself from what you say you want, from what you say you want. If we could tell you one thing, if we could tell you one thing about joy is that it is an octave that may be known and expressed through as is truth, as is love, as is being known by your source, These can be aligned to. These can be aligned to in choice and in willingness to release the things that you have utilized to separate yourselves from them. That's a teaching of the day. And that is another teaching for another day, period.
Wow.
So that's their take on it.
Wow.
From my
Okay.
small self indignation,
And your what? Your small self what?
Small self indignation, when I go off, they sometimes come in and, so it's not wrong that you can have this all the time. It's just, it's not the pill version, I think, of let me be happy all day long.
Right. And I think I heard what it said is that like part of the reason why you're not happy is because you're choosing to suffer. I mean, you're choosing you have a choice or not choice to suffer, and in hard times it's hard not to suffer, but then again it's a choice. Um,
Yeah, they're saying it depends on how you've claimed your experience. And this is a lot about how you claim experience and what you were taught experience to be. So
mm,
you kind of assume what you're supposed to have based on what you were taught you should feel.
mm,
And you to agreement with this really on a collective level.
right. Yeah, because we collectively think it's raining, I'm going to be sad. I mean, it's just collectively we have this belief about what it means when it rains, and we've agreed that that's bad. It's better when it's sunny. I mean, it's a similar. I'm using a metaphor for the same kind of experience in life. When it's sunny, we think, oh, that's good. That's what I'm supposed to be experiencing. I must be hitting the divine, right? And when I'm having a hard time, maybe I'm not, I'm away from the divine. I'm suffering.
Mm.
Where I think what I heard you say is it could all be joy, but our
Yeah,
constructs are what makes it negative. Rain equals sad. Um,
yeah. Attachment to what is.
yeah, yeah.
That's the. They've been doing this whole series. I mean, this live stream series that they're doing now and that they're finishing up has been about freedom from pain, and they've been
Mm,
talking a lot about our attachment to pain as a way of learning and growing, and that there are other. They say it's one book on the bookshelf. There are other books you can choose to learn from. They're not going to discount it as a way to learn, but it's not the only way.
okay, so when your dog passed away, right, I assume that was really painful. So, based on
But
the
of
things that
course,
you recently channeled, how would you have taken that information you recently channeled?
it's a really good question. By understanding that she needed to go, by understanding that she needed to go, that the loss was my own, that the loss was my own, that I was the one in pain, that I was the one in pain because I wasn't getting what I wanted, because I wasn't getting what I wanted, even if keeping her
Mm,
alive. Even if keeping her alive would require her to suffer longer, would have required her to suffer longer. The realization that nothing is permanent, that nothing is permanent, is an enormous lesson for all of you when a loved one crosses. And when you have a loved one who crosses, what you're really releasing is your attachment to him or her, is your attachment to him or her on this plane, not the true self. Not the true self who is always somewhere, who is always somewhere in your expression with it, and you're in expression with it somewhere as well, Release. When you release who you think you are, allow the true self to be known, and allow the true self to be known, there is a similar passage. There is a similar passage. You believe yourself to be your achievements. You believe yourself to be your achievements, or what has been said about you, or what has been said about you, the relationship you had last, or may have next, once you understand that who and what you are, that who and what you are is of the divine, you're here to learn. You are here to learn. Everything may be learned through. Everything may be learned through, and no experience will be constant. And no experience needs to be discounted. You can learn in different ways. You can learn in different ways. But we do not discount pain. We simply say it is not a good prescription. It is not a good prescription. You can take another pill. You can take another pill to learn through, than suffering, period, period, period.
what pill would you take then?
I think that was a metaphor. Exactly right. They're saying exactly right. Say this. I mean, I'll say this. In my way, I didn't get into any of this stuff because my life was going so well. It really wasn't. I got into it at 25, really bottoming out in a hotel in St. Paul, with a spinning gopher outside my window. I was in the Gopher Campus Motor Lodge,
Well,
and they leave these Bibles in the drawer. And here I was, this atheist, who went and opened this book that I doubt I'd ever opened before, and it said prayer for people in crisis. And I just knew I was in crisis. I don't know what I could have named it, but I said it. And 3 days later, I heard a voice telling me to get my act together and how to do it, and I did. And
mm,
that changed everything.
mm,
Now, would I be doing the work that I'm doing if I hadn't gone through that? And really the hell that followed. Because going from living in a world where there is no God, and that's quite comfortable, and perhaps there is one, is really like moving to another planet.
mm-hmm,
And for me, and I had, in those days, I had platinum blonde Billy Idol hair and a leather jacket. I was a, hard drinking, chain smoking, playwright out of Yale. And
mm,
suddenly I was embarking on this whole other journey.
mm,
And it was crazy. Would I be here doing this without that? I doubt it. Are there
mm,
other ways to learn? I think so. When I was at Esalen, there were kids in their 20s in my workshop, and they're wide open to this. And they're not coming to it because they lost all their money in the stock market, or their husband left him after, 30 years, and now suddenly I need something more. They're claiming it as something that exists and is possible.
mm.
I think
Wow.
that's really kind of remarkable.
Right, it is remarkable. I love these millennials. They're fantastic.
I
So then
agree.
what would you do then? So if you aren't swallowing the pill, then part of what you're doing is saying, instead of saying I lost my dog, I was attached to my dog, or whatever it is, that the analogy of the dog is losing some idea or thought or belief or actually even something that gave you a sense of security and
Yeah.
letting go of that. And so I think that there's a natural human response of feeling sadness, of remorse, of
I don't I don't get that that's what they're saying. We don't feel that. I think they're talking about suffering. And what they were saying when you use that example as the way to attend to it, they're saying what a wonderful opportunity to love again, to love again, to continue to love, as opposed to mourning the loss
oh, I
of
see.
love.
Okay.
What a
Okay.
wonderful opportunity now to go.
Oh, I see. So it's like great that you like continue the love that you had for that dog. It's
Exactly right.
continue to love even amidst your instead of suffering, continuing to love.
I'm going to go to them. They're saying absolutely yes. They're saying you can have the experience you want, but don't prescribe the experience because they are what you think you should have, which many do,
Mm-hmm.
which is what many of you do. Look at that man. Look at that man. He left me. He left me. I will hate that man. I will hate that man. Look at that man. Look at that man. He left me. He left me. I must not be worth anything. I must not be worth anything. You claim your stories. You claim your stories. Look at that man. Look at that man. He left me. He left me. Here I may find somebody new. Here I may find somebody new who values who I truly am, who values who I truly
Mm,
am.
mm-hmm.
You choose the way you address your experiences. Your experiences, they were taught to believe, based on what you were taught to believe and who you think you are, and who you think you are, period.
I see. So I see what the I'm drawing again upon something that you said earlier in the interview that we live in fear. So the he didn't love me because I'm not good enough. He didn't love me for all these different. Those are all fear-based responses. Versus if you take that from a loving space, it's like I get to love again. I get to be, maybe he didn't value me, so I should be in out of self-love. I should be with someone who truly loves me. So you're moving from fear to love. Is that the
Yeah, they're
equation?
saying exactly right.
I've been talking to Paul Selig about his book, The Book of Mastery, of which you can read all about a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about today. And make sure to go to his workshop in Seattle on September 10th and 11th. Is that right? Saturday and Sunday. And you can go tell us your website again if people want to sign up.
It's just my name, paulselig.com, PAULSELIG. That's the bottom of the book,
Yeah.
CJ. There you go.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show and would love your support in any way by giving me comments below or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.